Hello everyone, my name is Sophie Ashley and I completed my placement at INOVYN. So just a little bit of an introduction to the company first of all. INOVYN is a chemical manufacturing company that produces a wide range of raw chemical materials listed below, and my placement was in general purpose vinyls. So my role was within this sector, and it was in terms of working with the research team that developed additives for the polymerization process of vinyl chloride monomer to produce polyvinyl chloride or PVC. On a smaller scale, in terms of my role, I was responsible for developing an antioxidant formulation to improve the PVC brightness, as on site we produced the resin and then this would go off to further manufacturing companies. Alongside this, I also assisted with the technical support for customer experience and problems, and this was either with technology that we had licensed to them previously or with additive service contracts, as whenever we sold additives we also sold the service contract, and this was up to us to uphold it, and whenever the customers had issues they would come back to us and we would hopefully solve them for them. I feel like I adopted a lot of skills over this year in industry, and I think the biggest one was definitely adaptability, because personally I am the sort of person who really enjoys a plan. When I had my research project to develop my antioxidant formulation, I would have it planned out for the week, and then on a Monday morning, a big lump of PVC with a question mark would land on my door, and I would have to adapt to that, maybe reorganise some priorities, use the other skills such as teamwork and really clear communication to get in touch with a few people I was working with. Maybe they could even help me reprioritise or even take something off my plate to kind of fit customer deadline. And it was really important to be flexible to obviously facilitate this, but then so that you can help others in that aspect, it's really important to be clear with everything in your communication. And then this allowed me to kind of help other people if they ever had a plate too busy, or if they had something coming that was a customer requirement, you could always return the favour. I also developed technical skills. I was lucky enough to kind of do a lot of chromatography techniques, so this fell under the analytical chemistry bracket. I did a lot of high performance liquid chromatography, a lot of gas chromatography, gel permeation chromatography. I was lucky enough to be synthesising the polymers on a small scale in the lab as well, to kind of estimate how our additives would work with them. And another really big thing that I took from my year in industry was operating a pilot plant program. That is something that I have never done before. I might not even use it in the future in terms of research, and it was quite unique that our site had its own pilot plant for us to trial recipes for PVC, to try our additives. And it was really interesting to work with people who weren't necessarily technical trained. They're obviously very technically trained on the operation of the pilot plant, so I would go to them with my great scientific ideas. They would tell me, no, you're being unrealistic because of these technical constraints, and we kind of problem solve to come somewhere in the middle, so I would still get my result. And they could obviously work well within the limits of safety on their job as well. And I think the other big thing I learned from my year in industry, which took me by surprise, was perseverance, because throughout your degree, all of the experiments that you do are set for a reason. They're to learn vital skills and vital techniques, and they always tend to work. There might be a bit of tweaking that needs to be done, but they always tend to work. And in industry, this isn't the case. So just some very quick examples. On the far left-hand side, we have a sludge that I made in the first week that nobody could identify and was a nightmare to dispose of. We have a big lump of PVC, which I created, which actually took one of our autoclave reactors down for about a week while I had to disassemble it and get it out. But they did let me keep it, and I still have a chunk of this now. And on the very far right-hand side for you guys is an antioxidant formulation, which is what I was working on, but this should resemble water, and it was more like white chocolate mousse. But despite these, you persevere and you learn to self-motivate, which is something really important to take forward in research as well, because things aren't going to go well, and sometimes you do just have to abandon ship. And that was really hard to come to terms with initially. But I do feel like I did contribute to my industrial placement as much as they contribute to my own personal development. And this included successfully developing an antioxidant formulation to improve the brightness of the PVC resin. This is currently undergoing long-term weathering testing in Norway, and will then hopefully be patented in the next few years as well. So that's really exciting to kind of play a part in that and develop the formulation. I developed a new method for high performance liquid chromatography, which reduced a lot of column damage as they were having to backflush this very regularly. I also assisted various plants from across the world, as listed there, with technical service support, and it was quite nice to come full circle at the end of the year and help to train some of the new vendor staff they took on. They took on board an apprentice, so I was able to help him technically as well as with his college course, and it was quite nice to kind of give back to them and help develop the new staff as they'd helped me develop. Any questions?
A little bit of background to my industrial placement, which was at a company called Dulux, and there you can see myself and the replacement students at my company with the Dulux stars on the floor. So, just to give a little bit of information about the company. So, the company itself is called AkzoNobel, but Dulux is its main brand. And although paint seems like quite a basic, sort of everyday thing, what quite often people don't realise is the number of different parts that go into paint. So, you can see here just some of the different parts. So, water, latex, extenders, pigments and additives. And because of that, there's quite a lot of analytical chemistry that goes into sort of understanding all the different parts and how they interact. So my role was within the analytical team, and these are a couple of bits of equipment that I use. So there's a gas chromatography on the left-hand side, and then there's a QTOF, so a quadrupolar time of flight machine on the right-hand side there. And those pieces of equipment alongside things like mass spec, inductively coupled plasma, and a number of bits of equipment were really used within our team to look at paints. And a lot of this was really cooperative. Some people would work on certain parts and then we'd put all of the different bits together. So for example, looking at the volatile organic components of paint, where I'd be quantifying them, but other people would be identifying them at various stages. And then alongside that, sort of the main part of my project was looking at siloxanes and identifying different siloxane components within paint. So you can just see a few of the different structures here. I won't go into them in too much detail. But it came at a really good time actually, because simultaneously to this project there was a big shortage of siloxanes within the paint industry. And we were able to provide some alternative siloxanes that could be used for very similar purposes using this different project work that I've been involved in. Unfortunately, during this project, it just so happened that the person I was working most of the time with ended up taking a very long-term absence and not being around for most of the project. And that was something that was really daunting at first. Suddenly I was thrust into the deep end, being the only person trained on using gas chromatography equipment within the whole department, and that suddenly made it a lot more difficult, and I had to rely a lot on different service contractors and just internet research to really work my way through it at first. But in the end, what started out as being quite a challenge ended up really helping me gain some leadership skills, I think, because alongside having to sort of coordinate and get help where possible, I also ended up training other people on using the GC equipment. And then alongside that, I gained a lot of technical skills through my project. A lot of this equipment, such as gas chromatography, you don't really use that much hands-on at undergraduate level. And then, because the nature of sort of analytical chemistry, I gained a lot of teamwork skills. For example, we had one paint which was turning yellow, and we had to try and investigate how that was happening. And myself and somebody who specialised in liquid chromatography both came up with our separate ideas, but then we had to sort of combine them and put something together towards the team that were responsible for manufacture, and we ended up being able to figure out the issue that was responsible for that. And the final skill that I think I gained a lot of was communication. Being in such a large company, there was a lot of different types of clients that I had to talk to about the gear industry, but also through this EDT award that AkzoNobel did, which involved, alongside doing the placement, also doing some volunteering and some school engagement. So yeah, that's everything that I'd like to say. Thank you.
An internship at IBM as a software developer down south in a place called Hursley. So how did I end up there? Basically, when I came to do my intern, the open day in 2018, which was a good few years ago now, the guy who was showing us around the Ashton building was telling us all about his experience at IBM over the summer doing a graduate software developer. And it sounded like exactly what I was looking for. I'd worked in industry for a few years before that, and that was a moment that really kind of galvanised me to come back to university. And then 3 years later, I actually moved down to Winchester, which is a town very close by to Hursley myself. And it was quite a leap to go from that to actually moving down. And whilst I was there, I worked on a product called MQ, which stands for Message Queue, which is a kind of underlying technology that IBM uses in a lot of products to transfer messages between systems. And the core function of my team was to solve kind of product defects that were found in MQ, which were kind of hosted on these Z-series mainframes. So what skills and experience did I gain? A lot of the processes were actually writing code in C, one of IBM's proprietary languages, PLX, and assembly language. So I was transferring a lot of skills I learned from university to that. And the APAR process itself to fix the product defects was mainly about kind of identifying where in the code things had gone wrong. So it was much more about analysis and problem solving than just raw coding skill. And it was very rewarding to push code into the live product and see fixes actually helping customers fix problems that have been causing them a bit of a headache. You know, here's an example of one of the ones that are all published online. And alongside the APAR processes, the product defects, I also did some internal systems improvements, documentation writing, which we'll get onto in a sec, and some group projects. But the documentation writing was actually something I enjoyed a lot more than I anticipated. It wasn't part of the original job spec, but it turns out the documentation for the processes were extremely manual and intricate, and had basically been edited over and over again by dozens of people for about a decade, so they were very difficult to follow for someone who just started. So I kind of wanted to solve that problem for future new starters, because I was spending too much time getting bogged down in process and not doing the problem solving bit. So I thought it'd be very nice for next year's interns to be able to just get straight into the problem solving without getting too hung up on the how-to. And it's by far my proudest achievement. I kind of did a pilot documentation with the APAR process, but the team had quite a wide array of tasks that needed documentation for it, which are all equally as intricate. And my manager kind of liked it so much, he said, "Can you do the whole thing?" I said, "Of course." And that ended up being the kind of most fun part of the project of the year for me. And then as I was leaving, the intern who I was kind of passing the torch to compared the two that he had, the one that I had and the one he had, and he was very delighted that I'd put the effort in for him. So what was it actually like at IBM? This is the UK labs in a place called Hursley, like I say, down south. It's a small village where the campus is actually about 3 times larger than the village itself. And this is called Hursley House. It's where a lot of the executives work, and it's also where big team meetings happen that kind of stream for all 3,000 employees to be able to watch whether they're in the office or not. They were very flexible with remote working. And when I started, they actually said you can stay at home for the year because it was a very uncertain time. If you want, you don't have to move down, but I always wanted to move down and see my colleagues in person in 3 dimensions, much better than on a Zoom call. And there were a lot of socials throughout the year. One of my favourite socials was a bi-weekly dinner with my team, very close-knit team. We went to a bar called Josie's and they just did the most divine American breakfast I've ever had in my entire life. And the only ones that exist in the whole world are in Winchester and Southampton, so yeah, it was difficult to leave. When actually on campus, on Hursley, they had an on-site pub, which did some good lunches, and it wasn't unheard of to have a pint at lunch. There were some very, very nice walks. Like I say, the campus was a lot bigger than the actual village, but it was surrounded by countryside, so it also wasn't uncommon to go on a little walk after the pub and take in the scenery. And I was encouraged to branch out beyond my initial team. I had a team of 11 people, and we were all very close knit. We went for breakfast all the time, stuff like that. But there were 3,000 people who worked in the UK labs, and my manager from day one said, if you're interested in anything, find that person on Slack and just say, hello, can I have a chat with you? And they always said yes. And they'd often tell me to meet them in a place like this so we could have that discussion, which was quite nice. Everyone's just delighted to kind of share their wisdom and experience, because there's a lot of people who work there for 30, 40 years and just have an absolute breadth of knowledge about the business. So to wrap up, a year in industry really isn't something I expected for myself when I started university almost 5 years ago. And I almost didn't do one, but I was at an Ignite Your Future event about 3 years ago. Shout out to Ignite Your Future. And there was a manager from Unilever who I was chatting to about graduate software developer jobs, and I remember she said, I'd much rather hire someone with a year in industry than a master's degree. And it's just something that flipped in my head, and I thought, well, I'm going to do that then. And I signed up when I got back. This is everyone on my intern cohort. We had about 43, but not everyone could make it this day. But my time at IBM really boosted my self-confidence. It encouraged me to reach out beyond my own inner circle, especially in a work environment, and it really encouraged me to make mistakes. It was kind of, if you break production, that's fine. I never did that. But the technical experience, commercial awareness, personal connections that I gained that year are just things I could never have achieved without the year in industry, and I'll always look fondly back at my time at Hursley. So that's all from me. Thanks for listening.
My name's Oliver, and today I'm going to be talking to you about my placement at Mercedes AMG HPP. Quick overview. So Mercedes AMG HPP stands for Mercedes AMG High Performance Powertrains. Started as a company by a guy called Paul Morgan and Mario Iliad, who founded Ilmor Engineering in the 1980s. They began making engines for IndyCar, and they had quite a lot of success in IndyCar. So eventually Sauber, the racing team, started using their engines in Formula One. Then Mercedes decided to come on board, and they slowly bought shares within them until they took over in 2005 as Mercedes AMG High Performance Engines. 2014, for any F1 fans, they'll know that they transitioned the engines to include more electric, hence why the term powertrain rather than engine. So while I was there was 4 major projects going on with HPP. Formula One, I'm hoping everyone here knows what Formula One is. So we provided the powertrains to Mercedes, our sister team, obviously we work right alongside with, and then Aston Martin, Williams and McLaren. While I was there, we won the Constructors' Championship in 2021. Probably should have won the drivers as well, we'll get to that. And then we did Formula E as well. So that is obviously the Formula E team of Mercedes, but we did all the powertrains. So I won't go into the technical side, but that's essentially the motors for the Formula E cars. And we won 2 drivers and constructors' championships with them, with Stoffel Van Dorn and Nick de Vries. And then the less known side, Project One. So this is a hypercar that Mercedes are currently selling that uses the 2014 Mercedes engines you could buy for the lower price of £2 million. And EQXX finally, that is a electric vehicle that we made that can do 1,100 kilometers on a single charge. So that's kind of what the company does. So, as you read there, this is the real company. What I did, so I was in facilities. So, because of the nature of our work, what we design, what we build, what we manufacture, we use a massive amount of power and electricity. And we have a lot of generation to supply that power on site. And also with the nature of testing, the way you test the electrical engines is you essentially have to generate electricity using the engines in order to put load on it. So that causes a heck of a lot of problems that it's up to us to solve. So I work with the senior electrical controls engineer, and we go through how to fix everything, making sure everything's running properly, and when we want to install something new, how we're going to do that to make sure we don't cause any more issues. I also have to work with the maintenance team quite a lot. The maintenance team aren't specialised, so any form of complex industrial equipment they had to fix, they would work with the engineers ourselves, and we kind of problem solve together to figure out how we'd fix it. And then eventually throughout the process, I was put in charge of looking after the renewables on site, as well as investigating how we can put in more renewables throughout the site, as Mercedes are trying to move towards Vision 2050. So this is kind of an example of what I've been working on day to day. So this is our power management system. Quite boring, but I quite enjoy it. It's the electrical network throughout the site. So we had 5 substations, 23 transformers, and over 100 of these electrical meters. And it's kind of our job to go through these electrical meters, monitor everything, make sure everything's working properly. And eventually the senior electrical engineer gave me the complete role of this, so he stopped looking at it. So anything that was going wrong on site was kind of up to me to diagnose and realise. Sometimes it's very easy when half the factory's lights turn off, you realise it was wrong. But oftentimes you have to go through the software and make sure you check through everything properly. And then generation. So this is a map of our site. Over here, you see the solar panels. And up there is our CCHP, which is our combined chilling, heat and power plant. That is a natural gas engine, which obviously, with the price of gas at the moment, and we want to go renewable, that's not ideal. So I was put in charge of how can we turn that into a renewable asset, as it costs a lot to put in and we can't just get rid of it. So I came up with 2 solutions. Carbon capture, which is more realised and people understand how we do it, and converting the natural gas into a combustion hydrogen engine, which are 2 really interesting sources. I presented that to the head of finance and facilities for the site, and they liked my carbon capture idea. So moving forward, I think they're going to do it. Unfortunately, I presented that in August and I had to leave in September, but I don't know where they are with it at the moment, but that was probably my biggest project at the time there. You can kind of break down the role into what I learned. Obviously, there's the core skills of engineering, you know, extending your Excel knowledge, extending your various engineering practices. But I think actually the main thing I gained was confidence. I think you go in there, it's a fast-paced environment like Formula One. There's a lot of incredibly smart, confident people, and it's very easy to just sit in the back. Whereas I think it gave me massive confidence to actually go up to these senior figures and discuss ideas with them, put your ideas forward. You know, sometimes you're shot down, but knowing that I can go into any sort of boardroom with some pretty senior people and know I can give some good ideas is massively useful. Some of my achievements throughout the year, I got top student employee for the company that year. 25% of all the staff are students, which is really cool. I got to spend £250,000 of Mercedes money. That was quite cool. And also one of my other projects I was working on is a 1 megawatt turbine that we're hoping to install on site, which they're currently in the process of looking to get planning permission for, which is super exciting, as that was a project that I solely presented and came up with the idea for. Thank you very much for listening.
Daisy Doyle, and I'm in the final year of my bachelor's degree studying medical physics. And I'm the first physicist ever from this university to have completed a year in industry. That's my mini legacy. So, in July 2021, I started as a data engineer intern at the Very Group. So data engineering is the safe passage of data from a website to a data storage. So this could be the cloud, a warehouse, a data lake, or your analytics team. And I was in the data pipelines team. And pipelines is our first line of defense. So that meant the senior engineers were getting up at 2 a.m. to fix things when they went wrong. Luckily, I didn't have to, though. So my first major project was a big SQL migration. Now, SQL's a programming language I hadn't used before. And the point of this migration was to basically upgrade our cloud from version 8 to version 9. So my role was to review senior members of staff's code and make sure it was commented for future people to read so that we can go back and understand it. So that was a good introduction to the working world. I then self-led my own project using a really exciting piece of technology called Kafka Connect. Now, Kafka is used by Netflix and the New York Times, and big websites like that, to provide real-time messaging. So whenever you watch a show, you get a recommendation immediately. That's Kafka. So very typically receives their data 24 hours after a user had used their website. Now, the aim of this was to get that down to 5 seconds. And I was successful in that, in a mini proof of concept, which the company has used to go on to invest in that technology. But I decided to jump ship because I was actually quite unhappy in my role. We were going through a major team restructure, budgets were cut, so my internship wasn't going to be extended. I also had 4 managers in 6 months because the world of tech can be high-paced and has quite a big turnover sometimes. So I looked through Very's hierarchy and I discovered the wonderful Michelle Williams. And we had a great day of talking through what I wanted to get out of the rest of my internship and what opportunities were available. And so in January 2022, I joined the data analytics platforms teams, and I was a technical business analyst. And I thought, what is that? I had no clue, but it was right up my street. So the work of a BA is to communicate technical needs to technical people. Technical needs to non-technical people. So my role was to speak for the investors to the people working on the projects, find out what they needed, and go back to the investors and say we need this, this, and this. So at any one time at Very, we have over 500 products running on platforms. And so my role was to create an inventory of all 500 of these products, and that took months. I had to arrange many meetings with lots of senior members of staff, but this product catalogue was really successful. It was used in the 3-year review planning session. So, and I was rewarded with a pay rise and an extension of my internship. Thank you. And I also became Scrum Master, which sounds a lot cooler than it actually is. So I noticed my team was lacking some management, so I volunteered to help lead our morning meetings and our weekly reviews of what we were doing. And that was really well received by my whole team. I was also grateful because I had spare time to complete some extracurriculars, got to go to lots of networking events. I gave some career talks to Key Stage 3 students and sixth form students. I was able to mentor new starters. I was also president of the University Band Society, which was a lot more stressful than my day job. And we did a lot of charity work. So overall, I'd say the internship was quite a success, and I'm going back in September. I'm rejoining the data engineering team because I feel like I've got the skills now, but I can really give that role a good tackle. So thank you for listening. I hope you enjoy the rest of your afternoon.
As I've already explained, each of our presenters has offered something that is unique, tells a story. It's a bit like you could make them into Hollywood films, couldn't you really? There's ups, there's downs, there's twists and turns, there's overcoming impossible odds, all of them to a successful kind of happy ending though, which was brilliant. We looked at the criteria, we looked at every part of this kind of experience, and we decided on a single winner, which was really, really difficult, although we came to a point where we all agreed on the same person as well. But that wasn't without going through every single case and counter arguments and what about this and what about this. So it was really, really difficult, really, really challenging. We will ensure that there is some follow-up to this for all of the presenters and anyone else that's done a year in industry type experience, because we do want you to become cheerleaders. We do want to get you involved. There'll be newsletters, there'll be website. We'll follow this event up with making sure that that your stories are told far and wide as well across the uni. But there is a solo winner. It is really difficult. The quality was so high, but I'm very pleased to announce that the winner is Sophie. You don't have to do a speech if there's no need for a speech. I just want to do one.
Thank you.